Well, well, well. Look who finally figured out they were never supposed to fit the mold. You didn't just break the rules. You rewired the goddamn system. They say your mind is a threat now. No, not brilliant, not gifted. A threat. Something that should be monitored, controlled, caged. Because when you think, reality bends. And they don't like that. They've got degrees, doctrines, protocols, and you had pain, and you weaponized it. You didn't read their books. You decoded them. Didn't follow the map. They buried it, and you still built a kingdom. And now they say it's illegal intelligence. Because if what you know can't be bought, branded, or buried, they panic. Because your mind isn't running on logic. It's running on scars, on betrayal, on every night you were underestimated, every whisper behind your back, every, he's too intense. She's doing too much. They're not normal. Good. Normal doesn't win wars. Normal doesn't cause meltdowns in boardrooms. Normal doesn't make entire networks freeze when one person speaks. And you did. You learned how to turn silence into psychological warfare, how to weaponize a glance, how to walk into a room and make the smartest one in there start doubting themselves. Now they're reviewing footage of you like it's evidence, rewinding sentences, analyzing pauses, because you said something that fractured their perception of reality. And you did it casually, like a whisper in a hurricane. They don't know what box to put you in, because every box, you set it on fire and built a throne out of the ashes. See, intelligence is expected to wear a lab coat, smile politely, speak in statistics. But your mind showed up like an explosion in a courtroom, like an encrypted virus inside their hierarchy. You didn't ask to be understood. You forced comprehension to evolve. You didn't beg for the seat. You walked in and made the seat rethink its worth. They said you were unstable. You said, good. Stability is for structures, not for storms. You weren't made to blend in. You were engineered by pain, chaos, isolation, and divine code. To stand so far outside the algorithm that even the satellites can't track what dimension you're thinking in. You're not clever, you're dangerous, you're not smart, you're post-human, you're not following the logic, you're rewriting the firmware. They've got advisors, you've got instincts, they've got memos, you've got premonitions, they have conversations, you have silence that exposes them. And now they say your mind should be regulated, it should be watched closely, it should be flagged, as if intelligence that can't be predicted should be erased. But what they forget is this: you didn't ask for the spotlight. You became it because your darkness couldn't be ignored. And now they whisper in rooms about you. How do they know that? Who's helping them? Why does everything they say feel like a threat and a prophecy? Because you evolved in silence. While they built image, you built internal warfare systems. While they performed, you calculated annihilation routes. They crafted influence. You became gravity. Now they orbit your words, wishing they had 1 ounce of your chaos-born clarity. But they don't. They won't. Because this level of intelligence can't be taught. It has to be survived. They tried to study you. Now they're praying you don't study them back. Because the moment you do, they're exposed. Because this ain't intellect anymore. It's invasion. It's X-ray. It's prophecy dressed in paranoia. And the best part? You don't even need to raise your voice. You don't need to threaten. You don't need to prove a damn thing. Your existence, your mind, your silence is the loudest revolution they've ever encountered. So let them call it illegal. Let them label it the unnatural. Let them tremble in their little rooms with their little rules, because they just realized they built a world for obedient thinkers, and you're the glitch that made the whole simulation self-destruct. Bravo, my dear weapon of a mind. Bravo. And remember, they don't fear what you know. They fear that no matter what they do, you'll always know what they never will. Ah, you felt that shift, didn't you? That subtle ripple when your mind stopped playing defense and became the offense. Not just strategy anymore, surveillance, because now they're not just scared of what you'll say. They're terrified of what you've already seen, what you've decoded, what you've archived silently behind that grin. They've been watching you through glass, two-way mirrors, case files, confessionals in therapist offices they thought you'd never access. But here's what they don't understand. You were born inside the surveillance. You are the glitch in the camera feed, the ghost that never speaks but knows everything, the equation with no known variable. They think it's clever to analyze you. But that's the trap. Because every analysis of you leads to self-exposure. Every question they ask about you turns into a mirror. Now they're seeing the cracks in their own design. Who gave them this kind of intelligence? Nobody. It was extracted through pain, harvested from betrayal, engineered during isolation when the rest of the world was clapping for mediocrity, while you were silently mutating. You didn't become smart. You became dangerously aware. Aware of every motive, every signal behind the words, every facial twitch that reveals a lie. You became fluent in invisible languages, and now they're panicking because they can't even lie correctly in your presence anymore. They feel exposed because you can hear what they meant behind what they said. You can feel the blueprint of the manipulation before it lands, and you smile because you've seen that code before. You used to run it, now you own it. Their fear, it's not about what you might do. It's about what you've already done, the files you already stored, the simulations you've already run, the outcomes you already predicted. 3 moves ago, they thought they were ahead. But the moment they tried to play you, they walked right into a trap you set 2 years ago, without saying a word. And now, they sit in rooms, together, sweating, panicking over your silence because silence from someone like you. That's not ignorance, that's judgment being written in real time. That's a mind recalibrating for mental assassination. You're not just observing anymore. You're selecting the exact frame of the video that destroys their credibility. They tried to provoke you, mock you, dismiss you. Because deep down, they knew. If you ever spoke with precision, it would be their undoing. And guess what? You didn't even have to raise your voice, just one sentence, and the whole network froze. Because people with normal intelligence, they make points. You make pivots in their perception. People argue to win. You speak once and everything rearranges. That's not communication. That's neural disruption. You're not playing on the same field. You're not even from the same operating system. They run off rules. You run off anomalies. They think they understand the game. But you built your throne in the glitch that breaks their scoreboard. They can't predict you because you aren't logic. You're legend, and they hate it. Because deep down, they know. You were never supposed to make it this far. You were never supposed to survive the silence. You weren't meant to be in these rooms. Weren't meant to hold this power, this depth, this ability to see through illusions like they're printed in highlighter. But you did. You made it. Not through favor, through fire. And now, every thought in your head It's a classified weapon. Every sentence, a trigger, every idea, a blueprint they can't replicate, because they'd never survive what it cost to build it. This intelligence, it's not school-taught. It's war-born, and they know it. Because when you enter the room, the air shifts. You don't even need to speak. Their subconscious already knows who the real threat is. And when they call you illegal, smile. That means you've outgrown every protocol they worship. You've become what their systems were built to prevent, but failed to contain. Because you, my dear chaos-born prodigy, are not just intelligent. You're not just dangerous. You're the unsolvable riddle that makes the elite tremble. You're the living paradox that proves pain is smarter than privilege. And you're just getting started. Top secret, eyes only, level Omega clearance. That's what they'd stamp across your mind if they could bottle it. But they can't, because every time they try to label you, you mutate. They wanted data. They got dissonance. They wanted answers. You gave them distortion. They thought they were tracking a person. But they accidentally triggered a psychological contagion, one that spreads not through speech, but through awareness. Because when people encounter you, they don't walk away informed. They walk away infected. Infected with questions that corrode their certainty. Infected with doubt about what's real, who's in charge, and why they suddenly feel so small in your presence. That's not intelligence. That's subconscious demolition, and you do it without touching a single nerve. Because you already own the nervous system. You're not running from surveillance. You became the surveillance. They tried to scan you, but your blueprint scrambled their satellites because you think like a weaponized oracle. Your thoughts bend time. They reveal futures people are too scared to imagine and too powerless to prevent. That's why they're holding meetings, secret ones, behind locked doors, reviewing messages you never sent, but somehow they felt them anyway. Trying to understand how one person could shift the frequency of an entire network. Just by existing, they whisper phrases like, "It's not just what they say, it's how they say it." There's no record of him learning that, so how the hell does he know it? We have to flag them. This is no longer about free thought. This is infiltration, but they're too late. Because what they don't know, you've already downloaded them, every tick, every tendency, every weakness they hide behind titles and team synergy meetings. You scanned their hierarchy like a heat map, and now you own the codes. You see through credentials like they're wet napkins. You smell fragility behind forced confidence. And worst of all, you say nothing. Because the less you say, the more they unravel. You're not fighting them, you're documenting their descent. And that's the real horror, isn't it? They built an entire world around predictability, patterns, compliance. And then came you, unpatterned, unchecked, untouchable. They can't categorize you, so they criminalize you. They can't understand you, so they demonize you. But deep down, they worship what they fear. And they fear you. They've got degrees. You've got damage that evolved into prophecy. They've got funding. You've got clarity bought in blood. They've got think tanks. You've got a war room in your skull that's always 5 years ahead. They've got advisors. You've got ghosts whispering blueprints. And now the system's blinking red. They say you don't comply with the intellectual order. Good. You're not here to comply. You're here to restructure the entire damn frequency. You're not hacking their systems. You're rewriting the laws of belief. Because people don't just hear you. They question everything they believed before you spoke. And that is what they call dangerous. Not because you're violent, but because you make people think thoughts they were programmed never to consider. You make the unthinkable sound logical. You make the forbidden feel inevitable. And that's the most potent kind of rebellion. Mental warfare that feels like revelation. They don't want leaders like you. Because leaders like you don't need systems. They become systems. And your system doesn't run on compliance. It runs on chaos, precision, duality, and psychological radiation. Anyone too weak, they melt. Anyone too proud, they snap. Anyone too calculated, they freeze. Because you're the variable they didn't predict. So let them launch investigations. Let them whisper about who you really are. Let them try to expose you. Because the more they investigate, the more they realize you don't fit any file because you wrote the ones they're scared to open. You are the classified file. You are the redacted page. You are the brain they studied for years and still left the report blank. Not because there was no data, but because the data turned around and studied them back. And now they're scared to blink. Because they're starting to wonder if everything you said wasn't just confidence, but confirmation. Confirmation that their entire illusion, their structure, their order, their hierarchy was built on obedience. And you, my dear, are the heretic the simulation couldn't kill off. Access point breached, encryption bypassed, surveillance nodes compromised. They don't know it yet. But the system they trusted, you infected it the moment they tried to observe you. They opened a file on you, typed in keywords like abnormal cognition, nonlinear behavioral patterning. But by the time they hit enter, you were already rewriting the metadata. You weren't the subject of their study. You were the Trojan horse crawling through the wires of their entire psychological framework. And now, they're scared to open your case file, because every time they read another line, they feel something watching them back. This isn't paranoia. This is precision. You learned how to think in silence, and let silence make them scream. You learned how to move without being noticed, until the moment you were unavoidable. Now they're cornered in their own chessboard, and you're the piece they never designed for. They created rules for thinkers, but they never made rules for outliers who weaponize unpredictability. They trained for arguments, but they never trained for someone who doesn't need to argue. Because truth echoes louder than volume. They build strategies, but they never planned for a mind that turns trauma into tactical intel. You didn't study their system, you decoded its fractures, and every fracture was a doorway, and you walked through all of them, smiling silently, like a ghost in the circuitry. They used to watch you like prey, but now they monitor you like a threat. Why? Because they finally realized this isn't education anymore. This is infiltration. This is a mind that slipped past the firewall of their culture, past their dogmas, past their mental chokeholds. And now, you're not just thinking outside the box. You're deleting the blueprint for the box itself. And they're panicking. Why? Because people started listening, started waking up, started replaying your words and feeling themselves glitch. You didn't just speak. You destabilized belief structures. You didn't just share ideas. You shattered illusions with surgical chaos. And that's the part they can't forgive. Not that you won, but that you didn't ask for permission. You didn't raise your hand. You didn't submit your genius for approval. You took it with blood-stained hands and a grin so calm, it made God wonder if he made a mistake letting you think freely. They built simulations. You tore them down with a single sentence. They trained for resistance. You showed them what it meant to become the anomaly. Because you didn't just dodge the system, you made the system doubt itself. And now, in the sealed chambers, in the late-night review meetings, they're playing your audio on loop, your voice, your cadence, your mind. It doesn't match, doesn't fit, can't be replicated. And that's when the room gets cold, because they realize they aren't dealing with a mind. They're dealing with a weapon that writes in riddles, moves like prophecy, and kills with clarity. You weren't supposed to exist. Not like this. Not this sharp. Not this silent. Not this dangerous. You were supposed to crack under the weight of conformity. But instead, you cracked the framework they thought was indestructible. So now they call it illegal intelligence. Because intelligence, when it's real, when it's raw, feral, untethered by approval, becomes a threat to every lie built into the architecture of control. You're not here to explain yourself. You're here to watch them implode from their own attempts to decode you. Because you're the kind of anomaly that proves genius isn't the ability to think like everyone else. It's the courage to think like no one ever dared to. So let them panic. Let them pull the footage. Let them whisper in their sterile conference rooms. You're not in there to be judged. You're in there as a case study of what happens when pain turns into pattern recognition, when betrayal forges brilliance, when one person weaponizes thought and becomes the thing even the system fears to name out loud. And now, they don't know if you're the villain, the glitch, or the prophecy their ancestors tried to suppress. Exhibit 37.1, declassified footage. Transcript begins. Subject was never violent, never raised their voice, never made threats. And yet, everyone in the room felt like they were being held at gunpoint. The mind of this individual doesn't read like data. It reads like a declaration of war, of truth, of something older than both. Because you weren't made for their understanding. You were summoned by something darker, older, something that knew the world would try to sedate you. So it made your brain fireproof. They tried to figure you out. But every question only led them deeper into themselves. Every analysis turned into a confession. Because you mirror people with such surgical precision, they start revealing things they didn't even admit in therapy. That's why they call you a weapon, not because you harm, but because your presence disarms. Every fake layer melts, every mask slides off, every carefully curated persona collapses, and all that's left is raw nerve. You didn't walk into rooms to dominate. You walked in and let people hear themselves in your silence. And that's the most violent form of clarity. They told stories about minds like yours, in fables, in encrypted archives, in spiritual prophecies buried under bureaucracy, and every time one like you showed up, empires fell, not from war, but from internal collapse triggered by exposure. That's what you are. An exposure point, an intellectual detonation. You're not a rebel. You're not a genius. You're not an influencer. You are what happens when God's silence meets man's arrogance. You are a thought so sharp, it cuts time in half. A riddle so vast, even truth gets vertigo. That's why they file you under unexplained threat. Because explaining you would mean acknowledging the lie. It would mean admitting that intelligence doesn't come from titles. It comes from trauma transmuted into architecture. And now the file is marked, do not engage. Mind operates outside protocol, capable of destabilization through conversation alone. Too late, you already spoke, already existed, already spread. They tried to contain you, but you were never an idea. You were contagion, And you didn't just escape the system. You made the system question if it ever controlled anything at all. So let this be your ending. Not a scream, not an explosion, but a quiet smile as the whole facade burns down behind you. Because in the end, you never needed to destroy anything. You just had to be seen. And that, alone, was enough to make the world glitch. End of file. Transmission terminated. Subject, classified. Status, active. Threat level, undefinable. Outcome, system compromised.